Welcome back, everybody. Today we've got Igor from Amazonia. Actually, you just said you're switching the name. Uh, do you guys have a new business name now?
Yeah, we actually do. I didn't tell this to anybody. So it's going to be Rocketize, but unfortunately with an S, not with a Z. So it's going to be Australian version of Rocketize. And I've already bought several domains and switched it completely because I hate every name that I found because now you need to have YouTube hook, free. Facebook, every social network needs to be free, domain needs to be free, and all the names that I came up with were horrible. So I just decided let's stick with it and just move it on along, because we have trademark issues with Amazon, with service provider network, with APIs, with everything, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, you could just name the business after yourself. Igor PPC is probably,
Yeah,
actually, that might not even be available, but yeah,
I get it. Yeah, but it was a hassle.
yeah. Well, we were talking a little bit before this about topics, and something Igor brought up that I was really interested in is the audience overlap report and how you can actually measure the effectiveness of advertising. Even if the campaign looks bad, there actually could be a lot of really good outcomes and good findings. And so I think we should kind of talk about the audience overlap report and maybe start high level and kind of drill down from there. Does that sound good to you?
Yes, but with a slight twist, it's not audience overlap, it's how they call it, exposure group overlaps, which essentially is a
Mm,
campaign type overlap.
okay.
So, yeah, essentially the difference is, unfortunately, AMC was missing for so many years. I come from Google Ads background where Google Analytics provided everything, like you could easily define the click attribution. You could select first touch, last touch, time decay, linear, so many other things, and multiple like analytics on so many different levels where Amazon was going to be like in 10 years, but that's another story. But now what I can see from Amazon Marketing Cloud, and I cannot call myself an expert. I've just played with it, downloaded 5, 6, 7, 10 reports, but it's not important to be expert at Amazon Marketing Cloud. You can use 3 reports and completely change your advertising strategy with it. One of those reports is that overlap report, but the one that I recommend is called sponsor sponsor ads and DSP overlap report. So even though you don't have DSP, that report gives me the best results in terms of really simple overview of what's happening. Because there are other overlap reports which are just not looking the same data, but I don't like the looks. So this is the situation. I've seen campaigns, and I personally ran campaigns, sponsored display ones, that spent $300 in 2 weeks without any single sale, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
by looking at that, you would say this guy's crazy, who's running your ads, if you did an audit of the account. But the thing is, we did that intentionally after we saw information from AMC. And after we ran that campaign sponsored display intentionally built to broaden the awareness phase, we saw an increase in sales, overall sales, because we
Mm,
managed to move people from the bucket where they saw only sponsored product and sponsored brand ads, now to the third bucket where there's sponsored products, sponsored brands, and sponsored display, where the purchase rate is like 5 times higher than the previous bucket. And that result in increase in sales, the overall sales, before testing and after testing. Now, it's not that simple. You cannot just create any sponsored display campaign oriented towards bigger reach and hope that purchase rate's going to go up. It needs to be relevant audience, relevant targeting, so it makes sense. So that's what happened, you know. So really, but just knowing that there's a report in AMC that can give you that kind of visibility, that's mind blowing. For example, also, second case study, sponsored products. I help a big vendor, they're selling more than 4,000 products. They've been doing mostly sponsored products as probably most of the people, because that moves the needle and,
mm-hmm.
everybody loves them for organic ranking, etc. But when we started sponsor brands, when I came, I said, guys, you really should try with sponsor brands. And immediately when we started, the owner saw significant impact without measuring. He has his own way of measuring. He basically goes into into bestsellers list and manually scrolls and counts how many of his products are in the bestseller list, like top 50 or top 100, and memorize the number, like, and do that every week and say, "Oh, okay, we're trending in good direction or bad direction." Completely manual,
Hmm.
I
Wow.
don't I don't judge, That's what he's been doing, and that's okay. So the moment we added sponsor brand ads, which, by the way, had a terrible ACoS, like 50%, 60%, 100%, But the moment we added that, he started seeing more and more products in top 100. That by his measurement, without AMC, without anything. So unprofitable sponsor brand ads, you would say catastrophe,
Hmm.
idiotic.
Hmm.
Clearly, guy doesn't know what he's doing, but overall sales increased significantly. And then later on, when we enabled AMC for them, luckily now we all have AMC from a few days ago. Yes. Now we ran the reports and the same thing. So the overlap report, what it does, it's really simple to use. I have a step-by-step video on my YouTube channel that we're gonna reference. So with the overlap report, you see the unfortunately I didn't prepare anything, so I'm gonna talk, but it's pretty simple. So you have sponsored products as a bucket, people who saw only sponsored product and they purchase at a certain rate. But with this report, you don't have some vague metrics like impressions, like that doesn't mean anything like impression. Impression is when ad is served, and Amazon clearly said that it's not when somebody saw your ad. It's when
Hmm.
ad is served. So it can be served on page 3, or it can be served at the bottom of the page. Nobody saw it, but it's still served. It's still impression. And God forbid if you run your sponsored display on impressions, then you pay for something that nobody sees, because it's an impression. 1,000 of those impressions when nobody saw anything. And there you go, 10 bucks like that. So back to the point. Um, in overlap report, you see the actual users that you reached, unique users that you reached, the number of them who only saw sponsored product, and you see how many sales were generated from those users and how many orders and what's the value of those. And you have purchase rate. Purchase rate is actually divided by actual users and the actual sales. So it's not conversion rate, it's purchase rate. That just essentially it is the same thing, but this is the real data. That's really important. And then you see also on a sponsored brand level, what's your purchase rate? And then what's the combined purchase rate for the users who saw sponsored product as sponsored brands? And on average, I see that from that bucket, the purchase rate goes up like 5x or 6x, only if they saw sponsored brands plus sponsored products. So simple as
Hmm.
that. And then typically when you see sponsored display to that bucket, so now 3 exposure groups,
Hmm.
that's where additional 5 or 6 times more you see the increase in purchase rate. But there's that but. As you know, and you said it right, you're the one who doesn't like the sponsored display. Or
Yeah.
DSP, and that's completely valid, because we never had that data before. And I also don't like sponsored display, and I hate it when anybody from Amazon tells me you need to work on your awareness phase, consideration phase. That's like
Yeah.
corporate BS for me. Like, who cares? Give me money. I want sales. I don't want any
Hmm.
any any, any awareness. But
Hmm.
I don't know if they poisoned me, but I started thinking like that. Okay, maybe there is something to it that we actually need to work on the awareness phase, and then we
Hmm.
move those people from to consideration phase, and then obviously to the purchase one. Because I like that simple tool in Campaign Manager called Brand Metrics, where I like to see if a certain brand for a certain subcategory is dominating, for example, in the purchase phase where they are like, I don't know, 95th percentile. And then on
Hmm.
the consideration, they are are at 60 or 70, and awareness also terribly bad, 60, 70. So that immediately tells us, okay, if we do a good work on bringing more people to the awareness phase, they eventually gonna move to the consideration. If they're relevant, of course, they wanna gonna move to consideration. So more people who consider our brand are gonna end up buying. So that's the same logic that shows the what AMC shows. So whenever we have all three campaign types exposed to the audience, they convert the best. For some accounts, it completely doesn't make sense, but either Amazon is lying or just it's psychological thing that people, when they keep seeing the ad, keep seeing the brand all over the place off Amazon also, it just it's more known to them. Simple as that. Even in the real life, when you see those billboards with some stupid brand, but they are all over the city, you start to think, okay, the value is much bigger than it is, and it's still some who knows what
Hmm.
and from who knows where. So that's why I like it. It brings a significant shift from just looking at the campaign level data, or campaign manager level data, like what's in isolation, what works and what's not. And I perfectly understand why people don't use sponsored display as much, because it's completely understandable. But I think now with this big rollout of AMC, people are gonna realize that it makes sense to invest just a little bit more in those.
That's very interesting. One of the things that really, so there's a couple of things that really come to mind when you're talking about this stuff. So the first thing that really jumps out at me is I'm wondering, and I'm going to preface this with a couple of other things. I want to talk a little bit about which products make the most sense for this. But then I also am thinking about this in the context of not just which products, but is in terms of like category, but also which products in terms of like within your catalog. Like, is this a good play for your best sellers? Is this a good play to grow incremental sales? Because that's really if I think about my day to day right now, one of the main things that a lot of my clients have, also, is there like a certain price point where this makes sense? One of the things I think a lot about my day to day is like, actually, we've had really, really fantastic success ranking products. At this point, I can, like, with a crystal ball, tell you with a 90% accuracy if a product's going to rank or not and the exact path we're going to take to get there. But the thing that I've had a harder time with is growing incremental sales, especially on products that are maybe weaker than the market. And, I would love it if trust me, I'm trying every possible angle. I use a lot of different AMC campaign types to mess with this kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm really curious how this would work for a, call it, incremental product, like a product that is unlikely to ever rank, or unlikely to ever rank top 5 for its top keyword. So
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things I'm wondering about.
Yeah. First, are you talking about how sponsored display affects those or in general?
Well, I think I'm apprehensive to even use sponsored brands on a lot of products because we manage to profitability goals. So I, when I look at sponsored brand spend, I'll often watch it come into an account, evaluate it, and then it's like, look, okay, we spent on sponsored brands for 4 weeks. It did almost nothing to except hurt profitability. I turn it off and the sales stay the same and profit go up.
Yeah.
So it's
That
like
happens.
that
That
happens
happens.
a lot.
Yeah.
And
There's
so,
no, yeah. So I like what you're saying because I come from the same perspective. I'm all about orientation towards profit. The first thing that I ask is always, what are your costs? What are your expenses? Let's work on margins. And like 8 out of 10 people tell me that that's the first time they actually think about it. So what's your
yeah.
profitability margin? What's your breaking even A cost? Or, well, how we gonna do that? So I'm
Hmm.
completely into profitable PPC. That's it, unless, those exclusions where you want to rank, blah, blah. But
Hmm.
for established account, profit is the king. So yes, sponsored brands um, be just a waste, complete waste. Sponsored display as well. There's no
Hmm.
general rule. I wish, and I know you wish there is, just SOP for everything and you're covered, but that's just not reality. I've seen that sponsored display brings additional value in increasing um, that purchase rate or sales value, mostly for products that are visually attractive. So
Mm,
that can be clothing, that can be jewelry, or anything that's going to stand out if somebody sees the actual product with the brand name,
mm,
because there are multiple brands selling the same product, so you need to stand out with a logo or something, or brand name, or a headline that
mm,
pops up. So that's where I've seen sponsored display make a difference, or sponsor brands. Other than that, really, you will sometimes see that AMC tells you that yes, those three buckets are having the biggest purchase rate. For example, that happened to me. Let me share a fail. So we did that. That sponsor product, sponsor brand, and sponsor display. When those three work together, there's a significant increase in purchase rate and in sales. Okay, so what we did, we decided to go all in, boost the sponsored display, like just go at it. And we did that. We saw a bunch of impressions, but after the test period ended, we compared data and it was horrible. It was a waste of money because we pushed it too far. It was one of the first tests we did. We pushed it too far. We wanted to cast so wide net to catch everybody. So there were a
mm,
lot of irrelevant people in those impressions and users reached. So the overall purchase rate dropped, because so many people now saw the ad and fell into that bucket of sponsored product, sponsored brand, sponsored display. So, it wasn't a real test. That's why at the beginning I said, if you want to really do it right, you need to add sponsored display, but with relevant audience.
mm. Okay.
So yeah. So uh, I
Yeah,
think
go
that
ahead.
answers like which products are eligible. I've seen best results if it's at least some kind of a visual product where you want it to be memorized in the user size.
So this is more, and so if I was thinking about this and comparing like what they would call a durable good versus a consumable, this is more of a durable good that has a visual storytelling aspect.
Yes, yes. So that really helps. Also, just to cover the part when you said sponsor brands.
Hmm.
I'm thinking more and more about this AMC and what it gives us. Sometimes I think the data is completely off, because that's Amazon and we've seen that
Hmm.
happen, that not everything is as they claim, just if you compare different sources, it's different. One of the main struggles for me now, because you have search query performance, you have your search reports, you have search impression share report, and you have, whatever keyword ranking, and the data is all over the place. The source of the data is from completely different parts, So what's included in it and what's not. So that is debatable like for the whole day long. So, but yes, the brands really can, I think doing a proper testing on sponsored brands can really make a difference, in the long run. But at least it will give you information if it works or not, without just watching it a return on ad spend on Campaign Manager. But this report is also, I mean, I've been only mentioning these three sponsored ads, but there's also sponsored TV. There's also DSP. Everything is covered inside. For example, for one account, we spend 10,000 in sponsored TV. And we've seen using AMC that it did absolutely nothing to the account. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a sort of a test, It was okay, let's test sponsored TV. It's gonna be make or break, And without AMC, we could never see that and prove that it doesn't work. Wherever we saw sponsored TV in that equation, so not only three campaign types, but in addition to that, we saw DSP and sponsored TV. So there were five campaign types in general. And whenever there was sponsored TV, there was no change in whatsoever. The sales numbers, reach. Okay, reach was big, That
Mm,
was that
hmm.
was good, because that's sponsored TV. But no change to sales whatsoever, at least in the period that we measured. It can be that this summer we ran that sponsored TV, so a million people saw it. It can be that next year, because it's a seasonal product, it could be that next year we're going to see more sales as a result of that, but we'll know that next year.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but still, you can, and that's, we're talking only about one single report. There are so many of them that are very useful, so really, I like it because sometimes it really shows solid data that you can use and show to the brand owners that something clearly works and something clearly not, it's not. Goes with the DSP. For so many years, DSP was like with a veil of secrecy around it. So if you spend only 50K, you're gonna see
Yeah.
tremendous results. But now everybody hates the DSP and don't even want to try because they still think that you need to spend so much money, on DSP, which is not the case anymore.
Okay, so sticking with the more like sponsored ads stuff,
Yes.
I want to talk about what you've seen that's worked, like because again, like if someone's listening to this so far, you've given them a couple of really, really great insights. If you have a product that does or has like some really visual component, like that is an ideal type of product to start running multiple campaign types and maybe use that to start capturing more audience. What I want to follow up with is like, what do these campaigns look like? Are you doing sponsored brands, exact match, only your top keywords, or are you doing like broad match and just trying to blanket the entire market because you're trying to fill the funnel? And then after we talk about sponsored brands, I want to do the same thing for sponsored display.
Okay, sponsor brands, I like to try everything, because I've seen that for some accounts, broad match modified works, for some doesn't. So I like to try everything and see what sticks, at least for, I don't know, a month or so. And it's the data. You can easily see if it's going to go well or not, from experience, for sponsor brands, so I start with everything. I start with broad match modified. I start with exact, but recently for sponsor brands, I completely stopped with phrase match because it's completely unpredictable. So I've seen going crazy with search terms,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But the funny thing is that I see that it's really broken for some of the accounts on sponsor broad if you use phrase, and for some it's still working, which is crazy. It means like Amazon is rolling out changes differently in different marketplaces because I run a lot of European accounts, and I see some differences between US and Europe, at least in a time frame, what's rolled out and what's not. To give you an example, you can easily see sponsor brands phrase match as, I don't know, give me a product, keyword. Like,
I'm doing a speech in a week or so on vitamin C. Does vitamin C work, or do you need something that's like
that, for example, yes, even vitamin C. So I've seen search terms in sponsor brands, phrase match, go as crazy if you have a keyword vitamin C, and I saw search terms that can go as like immune booster, immune
mm,
helper, phrase match, you know. We know what a phrase match is, like, you have quotes, so something before that, something after that. Completely broken on sponsor brands. So when I saw that, I was like, I told to the team, go through every sponsor brand campaign we have and just kill it, And I got the mixed data. Somewhere
mm-hmm,
it's still working fine, somewhere it's completely broken. Exact match, still good. Broad match, still as expected. Phrase match. So that's why, testing everything is like, really, really need to be on top of everything because there were some sponsor brand raise match campaigns that worked very well in the past until they
mm-hmm.
started to be broken from Amazon, not from us. We are perfect. Amazon is not.
Okay. So either broad match modifier or exact, and going after related keywords only. You were not trying to go loose.
No, no, I almost never go that loose, with sponsor brands because, they're not that effective as bringing good return on ad spend, but sometimes do, sometimes sponsor brand videos do better than sponsored products, in terms of ACoS. That happens,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Definitely have
definitely
seen
worth
that.
testing. What I don't do, and I should be doing, is testing more sponsor brand videos, product targeting. Somehow I always neglect that. Maybe because I'm not a believer in those, but if there are so many people who are also not believers in that, that means that's an opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about sponsored display, because I think that's one where a lot of the audience is really not sure what would a good sponsored display campaign be to kind of get optimal outcomes.
Yeah. For example, I mentioned jewelry. For jewelry or similar type of products where there are so many products that are almost the same,
Hmm.
necklaces, that can be, they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know, let's be generous and say 50 types of necklaces, but they're not, like 20 of them and not a big difference. So the only way to differentiate is to have your logo on your sponsored display. So if you miss to have a logo, then you're missing the point, because otherwise nobody's going to remember your brand name, whatever it is. Now, maybe, okay, if it's catchy, but I like to put the logo there and some headline. Now we have now all these GPTs and stuff that can create headlines in every possible language as a pro. So I like to use headlines, I like to use logos and images if it makes sense. But very often I completely skip the image because when you add the image, your product goes like that, like it's tiny. So it
Hmm.
defeats the purpose. So here's the nice looking image that on the banner is not going to be visible, but because of the image, you also don't have the product shown correctly. So
Mm.
sometimes, again, also depending on the product, sometimes skipping the image gives better results, and sometimes adding the image it's going to differentiate you from the competitors.
But are we targeting, are you doing category targeting? Are you choosing specific ASINs? What are you doing to,
Yeah,
what's
I
the
do all of
campaign?
that. I do all of that.
Yeah.
I do, as a must, I do product targeting on different, known options like lower priced, higher priced, lower ratings, higher ratings, all the jazz.
Hmm.
Also, sponsor display category targeting, which is I don't like it because of you know sponsor displays, is lacking so many different things to bid and to modify, and it can go
Hmm.
crazy if you don't put the cost control. It's essentially it's a bid it's up and down strategy. You can bid $1 and it's going to be $2 easily
Mm.
on the CPC, which is horrible, and I hate it. But still, I want to have them. So sponsor display as a product targeting, sponsor display as a defensive, sponsor display as a category targeting, and sponsor display audiences, which is absolute horror if you work in a German marketplace
Mm.
because of it takes time to find the proper category in German, in France, in French, and all those languages. But
Okay.
all of those, and essentially, it's not like all of them produce results. Some of them are horrible. Some of them we see a potential and then we tweak. So if it's not going to bring significant number of sales, we just lower it and it brings a few sales at reasonable
Mm.
ACoS, only CPC based, not those VCPM or stuff.
Okay. The entire approach is
Yes.
driven primarily by using the campaign types that, we like somebody who's been around on Amazon for a while would use. So you're using sponsored display product targeting, sponsored display, you're going to test an audience, but you're going to put a cost cap on it. You'll kind of test category targeting, but same kind of thing where it's like, look, this is probably not going to do well, so we're going to keep bids really low. Um,
Yes. And we do that in runs, and then we pull the AMC report and see if it makes sense or not. If it doesn't make any sense, we cut it completely and leave only sponsored display for defensive purposes, and that's
mhm.
it. And if any campaign is showing good results, we leave it. It's not rocket science. We just if it's
Okay.
working, we leave it. And yeah, but everything is backed up by Amazon Marketing Cloud. That's huge for us.
That's a really clever way to approach it. I've never thought to do that approach. And so I think you really brought an interesting perspective today and a very actionable perspective. Like try
Thank
these
you.
things
Say
out.
say that again. Say that again.
Yeah. Yeah, you like try these things out, have a well-defined period where you're testing, and then once the test is done, go evaluate the results and keep what's working, get rid of what's not. I really like that approach. I think that's very well thought out, and I think that's like a really helpful insight for everyone who's on here. So yeah, thank you, Igor.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it.
But the
Yeah.
fact that I like the most is that you don't need to pay any external tool to run these reports, because
Hmm.
I've talked to a few of them once the Amazon Marketing Cloud, once I realized it's something really useful. I talked
Hmm.
to a few service providers for that provided access to AMC, and they looked at me as a cash cow. So it didn't make any sense. That were literally thousands of dollars just to have access to AMC, then
Mm,
hundreds of dollars to run a single report, custom report
mm,
on that sort of that doesn't make any sense. So I just want to
yeah.
say that for whoever's watching that, okay, you don't need to pay anything to use Amazon Marketing Cloud. It's point and click, so if you ever use the mouse and a computer, you can use it, just click here, click there, generate,
Mm,
choose your date range, run the report, see the Excel. If you don't know the Excel, then just copy everything to whatever Claude or ChatGPT and let it analyze the data. Simple as that, and you will get something, and eventually you'll do it yourself. But it's really simple and doesn't require any investment in money.
yeah. I mean, I'm probably gonna go right after this and try this because there are a couple of accounts where we do use sponsored displays for some very specific purposes. I'm really curious to see what the overlap report says. Yeah,
Yeah, use the
Igor.
one sponsor ads and DSP overlap report. Even though you don't have DSP, that one's gonna
Mm,
work. I mean, for me, I like that one the most, but there are quite a few of those overlap reports.
nice.
Yeah, I just want to touch briefly on one that's also very useful, and that's the time to conversion. But the way I use it is that I like to see, how many people actually buy the certain product? Is it after
Mm,
10 minutes, 1 day, 7 days, or 15 days? Because that changes our strategy completely, because by default, you have that sponsored display remarketing that can go 7 days, 15 days, 30, or whatever, 90 days of look back or whatever. So if you end up seeing that most of your products are being sold after the user saw your product, like after 10 minutes, majority 80% of sales come after 10 minutes. Why would
hmm
you run a sponsored display remarketing campaign for 30 days?
mm,
Because for that product, people buy instantly or after 1 hour. So that's a complete waste of time, and that can influence how you approach the strategy, how aggressively you bid. That also
hmm
gives you information. Okay, it's hot. When somebody sees it, they're gonna buy it, in 10 minutes. So bid aggressively, go to top of search, and do something about it. If it's a if it's that kind of product with that price range, if it's a $1,000 product, then obviously that period's going to be a little bit longer, but because people are going to evaluate if it's really something they need.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, that is really helpful, and I think that is a great place to wrap up. Igor, thank you for being so generous with all of your knowledge. If people want to learn more about you and what you're up to, where can they find you on the internet?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's best to search for me by the name because, as I said, I'm gonna have to rebrand our agency completely, new website, new everything. So yeah, we are on YouTube, we are on LinkedIn, of course, our website, amazoniappc.com. But LinkedIn would probably be the best place. And our YouTube channel, I try to record on YouTube whatever I know, so that I don't hold off any information, because I'm like information should be available to everybody, for
Mm,
do-it-yourself self sellers or PPC managers who are just starting out. I literally show, click here, click there. This is how I do it. And our internal training videos are actually from our YouTube channel. There's nothing like we do things internally completely different, and our YouTube we pay
mm,
post fake videos to misdirect everybody, So whatever is there. So I fully recommend, I'm an open book in terms of knowledge sharing.
Well, yeah, and I really appreciate that. I think that's super cool. I think we'll get the YouTube channel in the show notes as well. But yeah, that is so awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Sean. It was an absolute pleasure having you as a host. You asked pretty good questions.
Thank you. All right.
Some were hard, but I managed.
All right, great. Well, I hope I was nice.
Yes, yes, you were. You were
Yeah.
fantastic.
So, Igor, thanks again. To everybody else, until next time.